Hi, everyone. Welcome to New Idea Live. This is the podcast of the Ayn Rand Institute. My name is Ziemowit Gowin. I'm a junior fellow. And today I'm with Tristan de Liège, also a junior fellow. Tristan, hi. How are you?
Hey, Ziemowit, thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm very excited for today's show because I think that we're going to talk about something very fundamental, something very important for everyone or each individual. So we're going to talk about self-esteem. What is self-esteem? How to understand it? Uh, why we need self-esteem and how to achieve it? And one of the reasons why we want to talk about self-esteem is because it's not so obvious what it is, and there are different conceptions, different views of self-esteem that we think are fundamentally flawed. And so, on the one hand, you have the view that self-esteem is not important, that it's something bad. Some people think that self-esteem is really just narcissism. So there's Matt Walsh, a very prominent, very popular conservative commentator who created a video in which he says that that he doesn't have self-esteem. He doesn't have self-esteem because he doesn't need that, because self-esteem is something immoral. Even it's immoral because self-esteem means that you think that you're better than other people. On the other hand, you have a different view that says that everyone has self-esteem, that we are born with self-esteem. It's something innate. That self-esteem, you just need to realize your own worth, regardless of your actions. Uh, and so, in contrast to those two flawed views, we want to focus on Rand's perspective. We want to focus on it because we think that it's consistent. We think that it's a powerful perspective on self-esteem. It explains how self-esteem is related to our core values, how it's related to happiness. um, and so we want to show that there's a different view that is completely different than those two views that are prevalent in the culture, or at least that you can find them quite often. But there's also another reason why we should care about self-esteem, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And, we will go into uh, these contrasting views, and I think it'll come out more and more the more we talk about Rand's view, like why it's so distinctive and why she's in a position to give such a distinctive perspective on it, um, based on her unique philosophical approach. But uh, if we think about from the perspective of like why should we care about this? Why should we care about uh, the issue of you know how we value ourselves? And we will define it in a moment, so we'll be more specific about that. But really, if you're thinking about it from the perspective of like your life as a whole and the character of your life and how you feel about your life, um, self-esteem is something that you need to feel in control of your life. uh, if you want to be the kind of person that respects yourself, that you feel love and admiration for who you are, you know what you want, you can express your needs and boundaries to others and hold them firmly. You can know and feel that your ideas are worth expressing, which is crucial to creativity and crucial to ambitiousness and crucial to being innovative, that your needs are worthy of being met in relationships and friendships, that you're capable of executing your plans, ideas, and goals into action. You're capable of having ideals and living by them, living up to them. And you're capable of being an ambitious person and reaching your potential. for example, your productive potential as a human being. All of those things require self-esteem.
Yeah. So yeah, I think that's true. So let's talk about the nature of self-esteem from Rand's perspective. So we know that she doesn't think that self-esteem is narcissism. She doesn't think that self-esteem doesn't exist, as some people say. But she also doesn't believe that it's something that you're born with. And I think it's very instructive. It's very useful to start by looking at her characters from the novels to see, because they are, most of her characters, the positive ones, are people of self esteem. So by looking at them, by looking at what they do, how they feel, how they act, we can we can start grasping her view of self esteem. So let's start with the fountainhead and the main character, Howard Rourke. So without any bigger spoilers, uh, the novel starts with Rourke laughing. He's laughing even though he knows that he will quit his school, his university, where he studies architecture. But actually, he's not laughing despite that. He's laughing because of that, because he knows that that those challenges that lie beneath him, lie ahead of him, are something that he will be able to overcome. And so he knows that his decision to quit the school is based on the fact that he is able to continue to grow despite quitting the school. Um, and so he knows that even though he's quitting the school, he will be able to build buildings that he loves and build them in his own way. And so we can see that he's confident in his uh, in his beliefs about himself, and about his ability to create and to think. Right. Um, Another example, also from the Fountainhead, is, and again, I'm trying not to spoil it. Rourke has to quit his job as an architect, and he needs to work in the quarry. And so from a very conventional perspective, he's not very successful, but he does that very he works there, and he's very confident that what he's doing is actually consistent with his views. And it's also based on his thinking, on the fact that he is efficacious in his choices, and that in fact it's consistent with his view of being a builder, of being a someone who creates buildings. So he's not compromising his principles, uh, and he knows that he has this ability to create the life that he wants. But also, what's important, so one thing is that he believes in his ability. But the other thing is that he believes that he deserves that. So all of his actions are really based on those premises, and he doesn't give up what he loves. Um, so these are just two examples. I think that there are much more from the Fountainhead. But let's take another example, from this time from Atlas Schwag, and it's Dagny. Dagny Taggart, one of the first characters that we meet in the novel, that we get to know. And from the very beginning, we see that she's making very important decisions, uh, and that all her decisions are based on the fact that she understands what needs to be done, and she wants that. Also, again, like Rourke, she knows that she deserves what's best for her. Um, and let me give a more concretized example. There's a scene, uh, there's a press conference that Dagny Taggart has with Hank Reardon, another important character. and it's at the opening of the jungle line. Uh, and so one of the reporters who's suspicious of rare metal and the whole jungle line asks her, "Tell me, Miss Taggart, what's going to support a 7,000-ton train on a 3,000-ton bridge?" And what does she say? She says, "My judgment." And so here I think it's a powerful scene. It's a powerful scene because it shows how much she's confident when it comes to her judgment, how much she's confident. But also, again, the fact that she wants to build the jungle line shows that she believes that she deserves that she's worthy of it. And so these few examples are examples of self-esteem. So what do they show? What do they show? What do they have in common? They have in common the fact that to have self-esteem is to know that one is able. So you know that your thinking is efficacious, uh, and to know that you're worthy of success, that you're worthy of happiness. So we could say that to say that I have self-esteem is to say that I know I am able to live, I know I am able to work, I know I am able to create, but also I am worthy of happiness. Uh, that is my goal. That I can achieve by my thinking, by my creating, by my working. Uh, right? I can rely on my thinking, and so now we can. So let me now give you a more kind of formal definition of self-esteem once we know all those examples that we have analyzed, even though briefly. So Rand's definition of self-esteem is as follows: self-esteem is one's inviolate certainty that his mind is competent to think and his person is worthy of happiness. So again, self-esteem is one's inviolate certainty that his mind is competent to think and his person is worthy of happiness. So I believe that uh, this is what we can see in Howard Roark and Dagny Taggart, among many other characters that Rand portrays in her novels. So Tristan, maybe now let's talk a little bit what self-esteem is not.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add a little bit about just on the definition. I think it's important to notice those two elements, and that she's separating it. That uh, there's an element of you're competent or able uh, to think, you're competent or able to execute um, your goals, achieve things, and that on the other hand, you're also you're deserving of the reward of having achieved things. You're deserving of happiness. You're deserving of success, and I think breaking that down or contrasting that rather with uh, what we don't think it is or what Rand doesn't think it um, is helpful thinking about it in terms of those two different components. So, one core element of it is it's not something that's comparative. It's not based on thinking about yourself with regard to others. And in that definition that we just said, I think that comes out. It's about your actual competence to think, right? That's something that's based on your relationship to reality. It's not something that's based on your relationship to the opinions of others, the praise of others, your social status, things like that. And the other thing that's interesting about her definition and her conception is that she frames it as one's certainty that one's mind is competent to think. So it's is a self-evaluation as well. It's not something that you can get from others either. So there's no sense in her view that, the claims or beliefs or praise, or indeed the blame of others can replace self-assessment in this crucial regard. Um, they can't give you this kind of self esteem that she's talking about. That doesn't mean that recognition, visibility aren't can't be beneficial, and I think they are beneficial and even crucial in relationships and friendships. But that's not what self-esteem is for Rand. And I think that's a confusion that you sometimes see when people talk about it in the culture that, oh, self-esteem is, thinking that you're just as good as everyone else, or that everyone is important, or that you feel, um, you feel good about yourself because you feel good in your community, and you feel like you're valuable to a community. That's not what Rand means by self-esteem. It's
Yeah.
not a comparative assessment. And uh, secondly, uh, and this has already come out a bit, but it's because it's a reality-oriented perspective. Um, it's not just a feeling or just um, like a sense that or a belief that you are important or a belief that you're efficacious. If that's disconnected from actual evidence or an actual knowledge that you are efficacious. So, for example, someone who's second-handed. So we talked about the Fountainhead a bit. So the character of Peter Keating, who's in terms of social status and fame and wealth, um, you might say is very successful in the realm of architecture. But he's also very second-handed. All his standards for his work, for what he cares about, even for how he chooses his relationships, is based on what other people think. And his whole orientation is guided towards receiving praise from others, from trying to hold on to this positive evaluation from others. Um, and in a sense, he is successful at achieving his goals in a sort of superficial sense. But in a deeper sense, he doesn't have like knowledge of actually being efficacious. Why? Well, because uh, his whole view of being efficacious is meeting the standards of others, but he's not in control of those standards. Those standards aren't things that he personally has first-handedly agreed with, that he's formulated in his own mind, that he thinks are objective or rational. It's just whatever people want, whatever people value, whatever will make me popular. Um, and so, uh, even though he might feel temporarily efficacious from receiving that kind of praise, because it's not a reality-oriented perspective, it's not genuinely self-esteem. And this is the sense in which what you try to use as a standard um, is crucial to like whether or not you have actual self-esteem or not for Manchu. And then finally, there's one last element, which is that it's and this is the other contrast. We briefly touched on the idea that well, self-esteem is recognizing that everyone has an innate or intrinsic or inherent value. Um, Rand doesn't think that that's what self-esteem is. It's not some kind of automatic or simple recognition of an intrinsic value that you have. It's something that has to be earned and cultivated through continuous effort. So you have to, continually act and think purposefully, knowing what you're doing and coordinating your goals and being intentional. And it's about how you use your mind, being self-conscious, seeking knowledge, seeking growth, welcoming criticism, learning from mistakes, and so on. And uh, that none of that is something automatic in the sense that you can just, uh, you know, without executive action, like breathing or something. You can't just turn it on or off. You can't just say, "Oh, I feel good about myself, and I'm just going to decide to feel good about myself," and then now you have self-esteem. Um, it's being a kind of certainty, a kind of knowledge that you're competent and that you're worthy of happiness means that you have to prove it to yourself. You need evidence. And that requires continual effort and continual action to maintain it. Uh, and the other, I think, contrast you could make here is uh, that it's obviously from Rand's perspective, it's not something that you have innately. Not like people are either born with it or born without it. Where some people it's just, oh, well, they have an innate characteristic of um, they're more confident, they're more bold, they sense themselves to be more efficacious versus not. That's not what self-esteem is capturing. Self-esteem is capturing a cognitive evaluation of yourself based on your own actions. And it's something that is available to everyone, to all human beings, given that all human beings can exercise um, the kinds of actions and the kinds of choices using their minds that give esteem. And we'll talk about that more in a bit because that pertains to the sense in which there's a moral dimension for Rand. It's not merely a psychological concept, but it's a moral concept. Um,
Yeah.
and yeah, I just want to say one more thing about like what it's not is that we talked about a little bit about there's some views out there that or I think we touched on that there's some views out there that it's not healthy or it's bad to have self-esteem. And one way that this comes out is that people conflate or confuse narcissism with self-esteem. Well, narcissism is actually, and maybe it has come out here by what we've said, is it's actually the opposite of self-esteem in a sense. It's a evidence of lack of self-esteem. Um, you know, narcissism is understood to be a personality disorder where people have an unreasonable sense of their own importance. And it often involves seeking attention from others, seeking admiration from others, lacking empathy towards others, lacking healthy attachment to others. And it's widely understood in psychology that uh, people who have uh, this kind of personality disorder tend to actually be very insecure in their own mind. So, uh, from Rand's perspective, that has absolutely nothing to do with self-esteem, and indeed is the opposite, because a person who's narcissistic doesn't actually have this kind of certainty of their own competence and their own desert. It's rather that they see themselves as being superior to others, but that's just another way of being second-handed and just a different way than we were talking about with Peter Keating. So we might transition now to like, why do you need it? And I think some of that has come out a bit already in what we've said, at least implicitly. Like uh, we might go back to the questions I asked at the beginning, like, do you want to feel in control of your life? Do you want to respect yourself and so on? And I think there's a lot more that we can kind of break that down and um, clarify and talk about all the elaborations of that because a common view out there, I think, is you can just accept stoically the challenges of life, how life is difficult. You can accept the fact that it's difficult for life to be meaningful, that life involves a lot of suffering and loss. And look, you can just sort of stoically accept that, stoically accept your duty, um, you know, treat others with dignity and respect, commit to self-improvement. And what you might ask, like, why does that any of that require that you love yourself? I think for uh, example, I think Jordan Peterson would be an example of someone who would push on this. He would say it actually is the opposite. It requires, a certain amount of humility and a certain, maybe even to some extent, up to a point, obviously, if you feel bad about yourself or you feel miserable about yourself, it can be a motivation to improve yourself, to do better. And you might think this idea that you need to love and admire yourself would actually get in the way of being a good person and being efficacious. Now we'll set aside the moral part of it until a little later. But just sticking to the idea that like we need self-esteem to be efficacious, um, and to achieve happiness. Like why do we need that? So maybe Zima, you can say a
Yeah,
bit about how would Rand answer that question?
yeah. I mean, that's the fundamental difference between Rand's perspective and the perspective that you have just presented, Peterson's perspective or the Neo Stoics perspective. I don't think that you can actually achieve happiness by following what they are saying. That you should feel bad about yourself. That it should somehow motivate you. Uh, Rand argues that the fundamental reason why you need self esteem uh, is that it's the only way. It's one of the ways. It's one of the conditions of happiness, because you need to know that that you're able that you're able to work, to think, that your thinking is efficacious, and that you deserve that happiness. So let's think about it, what it would mean not to have it. Okay, so let's say that you want to formulate some ambitious goals or some vision of a good life. But how would that be possible if you don't believe that you can achieve it? So in this, so again, we've mentioned that for Rand, self-esteem has those two components. So one is about being able to think and to act on your thinking. The other is that you deserve it. So the first part here is at play. How can you formulate any goals that you want to achieve if you don't think that you're able to do so? If you don't believe that you can achieve them, um, you will not do that. Um, about motivation, so you mentioned, yeah, that maybe is a good motivation when you feel bad about yourself. Um, but how can you keep up the motivation uh, to pursue uh, those values when things get challenging, right? Or when distractions can arise. Another thing is that um, you want to make the choices that are necessary to achieve your most important values. So let's say that you want to become a doctor, or you want to have a family, or any other thing, any other value that is of great importance to you. But if you don't think that you deserve it, you will not do it. You will not do it. Um, well, another thing is, and it's more derivative, but I also think that it's quite important, uh, that you need to assert your needs and boundaries to others in order to be happy. But how can you do it if you don't respect yourself? If you do not love yourself? Um, Also, how can you be creative if you don't think that your ideas or your perspective are worth sharing, or that you're not even competent to act on your ideas? And so all those things, the importance of value achievement in life, your career, your productive effort, your creating thinking, all of that depends on your knowledge, your certainty. So Rand says it's certainty that you're able. So uh, this is This is a kind of judgment of yourself. So you're judging yourself as able. So I know that I am able to formulate my values, uh, to set some goals. I am able to do so, and I am able to achieve them. But I also need to know that I deserve it. And so those people who say, yeah, that you don't need that, they're simply undercutting, I would say, the necessary condition uh, of achieving those values. So let me maybe now uh, let's read a quote, a powerful quote from Galt's speech. Um, by a feeling he has not learned to identify, but has derived from his first awareness of existence, from his discovery that he has to make choices. Man knows that his desperate need of self esteem is a matter of life or death. As a being of volitional consciousness, he knows that he must know his own value in order to maintain his own life. He knows that he has to be right. To be wrong in action means danger to his life. To be wrong in person, to be evil, means to be unfit for existence. Um, so, Tristan, maybe we can now concretize it a little bit, um, and and try to talk about what does self-esteem affect. And so, why don't you start with? So, we think that there are a lot of values uh, that self-esteem affects. One of them is work. So, why don't you say something about that?
Yeah, and I do want to say just one other thing about that quote is
Yeah.
part of what she's stressing there that is, she puts it as a being of volitional consciousness. And in all of these domains, the point is that to live a human life, and I'll talk about that as how that comes up in work in a moment, is in all of these core domains of human life, whether it's work, relationships, friendships, how you acquire knowledge, um, even how you think about art or how you engage in leisure. Uh, there's always an element of it's up to you. Like it's up to your choice. Human values are volitional. They need to be formulated and indeed created. A human life has to be created and chosen and pursued by choice. And that really is what she's highlighting there is that that's the real root of uh, the need for self-esteem because we know that our lives are up to our choices. So we need to know that we're making the right kinds of choices because we know that there's this alternative that we could be making the wrong kinds of choices, the kinds of choices that aren't appropriate to human life, the kinds of choices that will not lead to our happiness, that will lead to our suffering or our failure. And so, uh, how does this show up, for example, in work? You mentioned work, Ziemowit. So, for example, how does having self-esteem affect like your orientation to work? Well, first of all, we already mentioned a bit. It enables a kind of ambitiousness. Why is that? Well, if you think that if what ambition is seeking high levels of achievement systematically in different areas, well, you have to have a high confidence or high knowledge that you're efficacious, that you're competent, and not just competent in the sense that maybe, you can achieve all of your goals right now, but but in a more fundamental sense of you can achieve your goals, or you can acquire the skills, the knowledge, the habits, etc., that will be required to achieve your goals. And uh, that you can formulate goals that require a lot of effort, require a lot of discipline, require a lot of commitment. That's sort of a way to think about what ambitiousness is. Require a lot of thought and effort. and might involve a lot of risk taking and failure along the way, but that you're capable of doing that, um, and that you deserve uh, to do that because you deserve to achieve like the rewards that come with being ambitious. You know, in terms of uh, whether it's being productively successful, um, or in a more spiritual sense, the finding work that you really love, uh, making a lot of money, being well rewarded and well regarded, not just well regarded by people in general, but well regarded by people that you independently respect and being recognized, being able to um, collaborate with and provide value to people that you respect, uh, and being able to engage in the kinds of activities that you really enjoy doing. And creativeness is another aspect of that. So why does creativeness require self-esteem? Well, we already talked about it a little bit, that if you don't think that your ideas that you come up with are worth expressing, if you don't think you're good at coming up with ideas, if you don't think you're good at acting on ideas, that's going to be a huge inhibitor of your ability to be creative. Um, I'm understanding creativity here as uh, an orientation towards creating new values that are appropriate to the kind of domain that you're working in, which is typically how psychologists understand it. And that's a kind of self-expression because, and it's also risky, um, because it means you're putting yourself on the line. You're putting ideas that are, relatively unique to you, and saying, "Look, I think these are worth trying out. I think these are worth expressing." Whether it's in, because I think creativity goes beyond just art, but whether it's just in the realm of art, where it's you have musical or ideas in painting that you think are worth expressing, or whether it's in the realm of business that you have uh, innovative business ideas that you think are worth expressing, worth taking a risk on, and you trust yourself to do it, and you think, oh yeah, I'm these ideas that I come up with in my head are worthy of being explored. Or whether it's in like a scientific or academic domain where it might be a new way of thinking about a certain concept or a certain topic, that's worth doing. um, all of that requires self-esteem. And uh, as you said before, Ziemowit, I think for people who are ambitious and want to be creative in their work, it requires persistent motivation, not giving up. And it requires being ready to seek challenges and growth. And if you don't think you're able to do that, if you don't think you're able to stick to those goals, if you don't think you're able to achieve difficult goals, and if you don't think you deserve the success that will come from that, you're not going to be able to have the ambitiousness and creativity that being successful in work requires.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's actually pretty easy to find people like that. Sometimes I know people who are able. I don't know if they believe that they are able, but they definitely don't believe that they deserve it. They don't think that they deserve pursuing a career that they love, and instead, they choose something that they do something that is chosen, usually by their parents, or sometimes it's the some cultural pressure, and it's also one of the consequences of not having self esteem. So now let's talk about self esteem in relationships. And probably the first thing to say is that having self esteem means that you will surround yourself with not with people who will admire you, uh, or people that you want to uh, like pretend that you are someone else, and that because of that they will say nice things about you. But you will actually want to surround yourself with people who are worthy of your respect on their own, not because they are some instruments to feed your pseudo self esteem. And I think here again, like you've mentioned before, the example of Peter Keating. So he wants to be surrounded by people who will praise him, and someone who has self-esteem, someone who believes uh, in his own worth and his own efficacy. He believes that he's capable, will not do that. He will not want people who will just say nice things uh, just because. And again, in the Fountainhead, it would be Howard Rourke. So like compare, it's very instrumental. It's very useful to compare the kind of people that Peter Keating surrounds himself with and the kind of people that Howard Rourke chooses. And so hard work chooses people that are independent, people that respect themselves. And yeah, like they respect work as well. And I think that you've mentioned uh, that even though it is fundamentally my own judgment that I am worthy, that I am capable, uh, it is it is important that other people can also see that. But the difference is that my self worth um, and my confidence doesn't come from their judgment. It's more like I am recognizing that their judgment is rational, that they see my virtues, they see my merits, and based on that, they respect me. Um, and so I want to be with people who are first-handed in their own thinking. And it also, so the other point that is strictly related to that is that if you have self-esteem, your attachment will be healthy. It will be healthy because it will be based on mutual respect. Again, so not on the fact that you're pretending to be someone else and you want to be praised by that other people. And in this case, in case of it's not like Peter Keating really cares about those people. It's not like those people are a value to him. They are not. It's very difficult, or I would say it's even impossible if you don't have self esteem at all. It's impossible to value other people because you will not be choosing people based on their actual virtues. You will most likely end up, well, we'll talk about that maybe in a couple of minutes. And the last thing that I wanted to add when it comes to self-esteem and relationships, and we've mentioned that, is that because you respect yourself, you love yourself, you know your worth, you know your capacity to think and to live, to act in the world, you will be able to say to someone uh, that his behavior is off, that there's something wrong with the way that you treat me. And I've seen a lot of people who don't say that, who don't set any boundaries because they don't believe in themselves, and they sometimes know that, and they would say, "Yeah, I don't deserve it." They will literally say that, uh, and so they are, in a way, sometimes intentionally allowing other people uh, to step on them, if you will. Of course, it doesn't have to be intentional, but the main point is, if you have self-esteem, uh, you will not let other people mistreat you, and you will be. It would be natural for you to stand up for yourself, but also, and it's also important. Sometimes people even people you like or respect, they might say some things that belittle you. Like someone might say that, yeah, you're not a good person, and like you're not able, you're not worthy to stick to those terms. Uh, and if you know your actual worth, so assuming that you have that, that you have actual self-esteem. So again, it's not something that you choose by will, that or is just a feeling. But if you have an actual real self-esteem, which means that you have evidence to believe in yourself, in your thinking, and believe that you're worthy, it will not bother you. It will not bother you because you know that that person's judgment uh, is not rational. It's not objective. Um, and so again, like I think it's very useful again to take a look to, for those of you who have read The Fountainhead, uh, think about the difference between Rourke's approach to people and his friends and Peter Keating's. Tristan, would you like to add something to this point?
I would just, yeah, I would just add quickly another contrast. You know, we've been talking about second-handedness, and Keating is obviously an extreme example of that. But another probably more common contrast as well is people who have depression and make self-destructive choices because they don't think they deserve any better. So, you know, speaking for myself, um, I had depression at one point in my life, or around the time I was in college. Um, and I would, you know, choose to be around people or accept being around people that I didn't really have a lot of respect for. I didn't necessarily think were good people. I didn't think they were people that were, you know, making me into a better person. If anything, it was reinforcing bad habits, and I was accepting my bad habits by being around them. So I was kind of like lowering my standard of how I wanted to live, and being around people that I didn't respect kind of fit that. You know, it's sort of commonly known in psychology that people surround themselves with people that share their sort of levels of self-esteem. And if you have low self-esteem, you're going to surround yourself with people who have low self-esteem, and it's very difficult for people with low self-esteem to be around people who do respect themselves and do really love themselves and see themselves as very efficacious, because you know that contrast is very visceral. um, but to get out of that, you have to develop self-esteem, and you have to develop the idea that you deserve better and you deserve to be around better people, or at least you can earn that desert. Um, so yeah, depression would be another big contrast, where yeah, clearly that can also apply both to relationships and work. The moral dimension of self-esteem, I think we've talked about that a little bit, but I think probably for a lot of people who aren't familiar with Rand's work, or only somewhat familiar with it, the idea of self-esteem being a moral value or having a moral dimension uh, is going to be, you know, an unusual framing. Um,
Yeah. So
so yeah.
yeah. So why don't you? So okay. So actually, one more thing about that. The last contrast that you mentioned about depression, about anxiety. Uh, One of the problems is that people reinforce the idea that they don't deserve by hanging out basically with people who are the same. And there's also this tendency when you're depressed or when you have anxiety, uh, that you're not actively thinking, that you're not being objective. You're not being because people. so I'm not talking now about like clinical depression, when you can't even like get up in the morning. But most of people who have depression are people who are able and who usually do function in society, and they go to work or they study, etc. But the problem is, one of the problems is that they are not actively thinking, and we'll move to that. They are not actively thinking about their actual achievements, and so they are not seeing their own worth uh, when they actually achieve something. And there's also the quite well known, especially for people in academia, imposter syndrome. It's a syndrome that people who have that, they believe that everything they have achieved, they don't deserve it. They basically don't deserve it. That they're not good enough. That it was just luck. Uh, that it just happened somehow. And they are imposters, right? Quote unquote, because they are unintentionally pretending that they are capable and that they are worthy, uh, whereas inside they feel that they are not capable. So they don't see their own achievements, and that they are not, and because of that, they are not worthy. So let's move to the moral dimension. So maybe Tristan, why don't you tell us a few things about Rand's approach to morality?
Yeah, and so this is a huge topic, and I think here is really sketch a little bit about why she thinks it's a moral issue, like why she thinks self-esteem is a moral issue, and a little bit about the way her distinctive approach to morality enables or underwrites her view of self-esteem. Uh, so for Rand, morality is a code of values that guides man's choices and actions, excuse me, the choices and actions that determine the purpose and the course of his life. Ethics as a science deals with discovering and defining such a code. That's from Galt's speech. So, uh, morality is about things that are fundamentally under your control and fundamentally guide the deepest or most abstract values that will guide your life. So it's not about, are you friends with this person or that person, or what kind of job do you have, or where do you live, or what do you do in your free time. It's about what are the more fundamental things that are important, like um, and self-esteem for her is well, Ziemowit, can you say a bit about like what she means by self-esteem being a moral value here? Like why is it moral in this sense that we've just
Yeah, I mean,
defined morality?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, sure, sure. So it is moral because, well, first of all, as we've said, and so morality has been implicit in everything that we've been saying so far. Part of it is because self-esteem is related to happiness, which is your moral goal in life. So it's the most basic sense in which self-esteem is related to morality. But the other is that self-esteem is something that shapes your character, like shapes your approach towards yourself, towards life, towards your actions. Um, so and and that is why for Rand self-esteem is a moral value, and for Rand moral values require something. They require, like every other value, like all values require certain means. You need to achieve them somehow. And when it comes to moral values, uh you need the virtues, you need the principles which you have to follow in order to achieve those values. And in the case of self esteem, Rand says what that principle, what that virtue is. And that is the virtue of pride. the virtue of pride. So let me say very briefly what is pride, because a whole analysis of the virtue of pride, it's for another, I think, episode. But very briefly, the virtue of pride is about creating your own moral character. And in the objectivist ethics, which is the first essay in The Virtue of Selfishness, Rand calls pride moral ambitiousness. And so we've talked about ambitiousness in work, but here, when we enter the more kind of moral realm, if you will, she talks about ambitiousness in morality. So pride means that you're uh, ambitious when it comes to being moral. But in practice, it means that to practice the virtue of pride, it means a consistent effort to be the best possible moral version of yourself. Um, so now we can think, how can we connect that to achieving self-esteem? So as I said, to achieve self-esteem, Brand believes we need to practice the virtue of pride. We need to aspire to be morally perfect. Thus, her praise moral ambitiousness. And so I would say that first and foremost, we need to follow reason. And I think it was implicit in what we were saying about self-esteem. That part of it is your certainty that you're able to think and to act on your thinking. And so it's not just thinking about a particular goal that you want to achieve, although that's important, but it's thinking about the fact that you are able to think. So there's this kind of self-conscious level uh, on which you are thinking about your own abilities. Um,
And for Rand,
but what's
I would
very
add too, Ziemowit, that for Rand, thinking isn't just, you know, you have an idea about something, or you just have a goal, and then you just envision it. As you said, that's important. It's also, how do you integrate things together? How are you conceptualizing things? Do you allow yourself to have ideas that are fuzzy or cloudy in your mind, or do you clarify them with definitions? Do you clarify like how they relate to the world that you see around you? Uh, do you, when you get a new piece of information, do you try to integrate it with other things that you know? Do you keep your knowledge in um, a hierarchical system where you know like what's more fundamental or what's essential here, and you don't allow yourself to be prejudiced by feelings or by unanalyzed ideas or emotions. So it's thinking is a very deep and actually ambitious task for Rand here as well. So I think that's an important element too, and that's how you can prove to yourself that you have uh, this kind of competence, that you have the competence to think, is because you're engaged in this systematic activity.
Yeah, and but yeah, that's definitely true. And the other thing is that because pride is about moral ambitiousness, it's about trying and achieving the moral ideal in your own life. It means that to practice it and thus to achieve self-esteem, you need to follow the right moral principles, because pride is also about creating your own character. And so it's also related to self-esteem. That is why it's so fundamental. That is why self-esteem is a moral value, because uh, it's in a way the effect of your practicing uh, the moral principles that shape your character. and that you know that you're being moral, that you know that you're following those principles, and in a way you want them to be your second nature. Um, and by contrast, so there's a contrast which I think is important. And so let me just mention two things. So one is that obviously practicing the virtue of pride means that you're not accepting guilt that is unearned. Um, but maybe more even fundamentally, following the virtue of pride means that you are not accepting moralities that require rational values or virtues, or moralities that tell you that you are not worthy, that the inherent part of those moralities is that you are not worthy of happiness, that you don't deserve happiness here on earth. And in this uh, and when it comes to this point, I think Hank Reardon from Atlas Shrugged is a great example of someone who's, on the one hand, very confident and in one realm. So he's definitely confident when it comes to his work. Loves his work. He knows that he loves it, and he's achieving great values in his work. Um, but there's a problem. There's some conflict within him because he feels worthless in the spiritual or moral realm. And why is that? It's because uh, it's because, at least in the first part of the novel, when we get to know him, he's accepting the conventional moralities that tell him that he shouldn't strive to be perfect, that he shouldn't live for himself, and that I think is a huge impact on his self esteem, which fundamentally I don't think that he really has it in the beginning, or if he has it, it's very partial. Um, the virtue of pride is the virtue of being virtuous, is thinking about implementing moral principles in your life. And so when we go back to our definition of self-esteem, and those two parts, one part is that you're able to think and act on your thinking, like you're seeing your that you're efficacious, right? And in terms of in case of the virtue of pride, you're seeing yourself as acting morally, as applying the moral principles in your life. That's crucial. Uh, and the other thing, that because you're doing that, you know that you deserve happiness, that you deserve to be happy, that you're worthy. So let's wrap up, um, and we don't have any more time today. So now let's go to. We have one resource that we'd like to recommend. So apart from Rand's novels that we have discussed, that is The Fountain and Atlas Shrugged, we recommend reading Ilan Jorno's short article, Why So Many People Struggle to Gain Self-Esteem. And we have an announcement. So for if you're a current or recent student between 18 to 25 years old, you can download a free digital copy of Atlas Shrugged. Um, you can download your free copy. You can share it with friends and family. So link is in the chat and in the episode description. Um, so just a few words about Atlas Shrugged. If you haven't read it yet, it's a story about a dystopian world where society is crumbling, but no one knows why. And so, and also the best and brightest businessmen inventors, artists, and scientists are mysteriously disappearing without a trace. And so you will meet in that novel a relentless business woman, a philosophical pirate, and a mysterious playboy. And ask, and you will ask the biggest question of them all: who is John Galt? And so the link to that is rb.gy/9eup. Um, okay, and so for next week's show, join Onkar Gate and Nikos Sotirakopoulos. They will be talking about the documentary "What is a Woman?" and conservatives' obsession with trans. Also, please send us your questions for future Q&A episodes that we have from time to time. And if you enjoy this podcast, please subscribe to our channel on YouTube. Click the bell to get notifications for when we go live or when we post new recordings. And if you're watching the recording, please like, comment on it, or share the episode to help attract new viewers. Also, if you're watching us on Facebook, consider doing the same. And lastly, if you have questions or comments about today's episodes, or you have suggestions for future episodes, please send us an email at newideal@aynrand.org. We read all of your emails and reply to many of them. So Tristan, thanks a lot for today. It was fun.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah.